we'll go over the week's most important and interesting news coming out of the China EV, AV, and mobility sectors. We will open the room up at around the 40-minute mark to anyone who's keen to ask us any questions. We have one rule. We appreciate vigorous debate, but let's all be considerate and respectful to each other. What Lei and I discussed today is based on our opinions and should not be taken as investment advice. Even if it sounds like investment advice, it isn't. We encourage those who enjoy this room to please connect with us on LinkedIn, get the word out to your friends, and of course, tune in again next week. My name is Tu Li, and I'm the managing director at Sino Auto Insights, a Beijing-based consultancy that helps organizations bring innovative and tech-focused products and services to the transportation and mobility sectors. I write a free weekly newsletter that we pull many of our discussion topics from. You can sign up for it at sinoautoinsights.com, which of course I encourage you all to do. Lei, can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, good evening from my side. I am the former chief editor of China Auto Review, which published newsletters in the only tabloid magazine in English, focused exclusively on the Chinese auto market. Pre-pandemic, I spent pretty much 20 years on the ground in China, covering the industry. Since the pandemic, I've been in the US as an independent analyst consultant, looking afar and still trying to keep tabs on the rapidly evolving market. This is episode number 48 and our first episode of 2022. So Happy New Year again to you and everyone else. You know, even though I've been away for almost 2 years, I feel like I've never left because of this pod. And you too, of our conversations.
And your connection to Weixin because everything
I feel like
is updated on Weixin,
I'm
right?
living in two worlds. So this week, I usually start with, the news headlines. But I guess, we've seen all the sales numbers come out, pretty much everybody, and except Tesla, which is, I think, coming out probably either today or tomorrow. Might be a stretch today. We've seen the numbers. And the industry news, I guess, one thing that came to mind was that huge CEO change at Volvo Cars, right? Put it in the former CEO of Dyson, and which was trying to make a car. So that was an interesting move. And a bunch of already, we're 6 days into 2022. And there's already been huge announcements, whether it's from China within the just today, right? RoboSense announced a deal with Deep Route, which we've often talked about. And the number of news and events, headlines coming out of CES 2022 is just, I've been...
And to be honest,
to
be honest, it seems global now. It doesn't seem so Chinese centric. All the news is kind of affects multiple regions, and so although we talk about Chinese EVs and mobility, it has a global kind of reach, right?
Yeah, I think the way you put it was the world has woken up
to China EV Inc.
Yeah, and especially over at CES, right? Chrysler announcing all electric by 2028. A GM with those shebang of news and products. Sony's pretty much official announcement that they're going to make cars. Although not themselves in particularly, but they're in, right? They've entered the game.
They're creating an entire department, and so partnering with the CM, right? Magna, I think. So,
and just I've been following CES and AVs. What's going on with this new consumer AV, personal autonomous vehicle, CAV, PAV? We're getting all these new acronyms, which is interesting.
And it's important to note that these acronyms really blur what it actually means, right? Are all of these going to be level 4? All these are going to be level 3, it's it's I believe they're going to be level 4, but they're all saying mid-year, mid-decade. So it seems pretty optimistic.
The key word here is level 4 capable. That's the fine print. So I believe it to mean it will be level 4 under certain conditions, but not a robotaxi level 4. That's
not point to point.
Well, then you talk about GM, which said they're trying to launch this personal autonomous vehicle that is capable of door-to-door. But so has Xpeng, so has ArcFox, so has Baidu, so has Jidu. They've announced that
Cruise.
They're trying to do this, this city-level, all-scenario ADAS or autonomous driving, right? So it is really blurred, I think. Nobody has a
and I think,
true understanding of the exact definition now.
I think we can safely say by 2024, 2025, it won't be hardware pricing that is the gating item that doesn't allow these PAVs or however you want to call them to be on the roads, right? I don't, guys like Deep Route and Husai, they're and InnoVusion and all these Innoviz, they're all pulling the pricing down, right?
And while we're at CES 2022, let's stay there, and we can maybe go back to the sales numbers. But a key word that stood with me for this year's CES is democratizing of safety of these autonomous features.
Yeah.
I think that really stood out to me. Luminar CEO Austin Russell, he said it. And Qualcomm CEO Cristiano Amon, he said it, meaning things like LiDAR, these higher safety features, should be as ubiquitous as seatbelts, as airbags, as all of these other features that we're so used to now on our cars, right? So I think we're entering a new phase. And, the talk about level 3, right? VinFast with ZF, right? They're announcing that first partnership. And other level 4 announcements. I feel like, back in 2015 and 16, when there was that first initial wave of fever on AVs, and then it died down a bit, right? The last few years. And this year, I feel like all of a sudden it's accelerating again with all these announcements. All the LiDARs, right?
Yes.
The Chinese year of the Chinese LiDAR.
Well,
so that's
to your point about the democratization. In other words, it means that these sensors and this hardware, the LiDAR that enables level 2, level 3, level 4 autonomous capabilities, they're going to be commoditized. Pricing is not going to be the gating item.
Right.
So that means ubiquity means that, they're going to be affordable for mass market vehicles, sub $30,000 cars, sub 150,000 RMB cars. So again, that likely is going to happen before 2025.
And it's only 3 years away, right? Last year, the year before, 2025 seems to be, still many years away. Now it's 2022, and you're like, oh, it's only 3 years away, and we're gonna see all these new, what Jidu calls it, the robot, right? The automotive robot. And
with China speed, it's going to be a blink of an eye. So pay attention.
And the winners are these 3 chip companies: Mobileye, Qualcomm, and Nvidia. How many announcements did they make, especially with regard to Chinese customers?
Yeah.
Zeekr again, right? Just a week after the Waymo announcement. Now they're working with Mobileye for a L4 capable by 2024.
So with Mobileye, they already have Mobileye in the Zeekr 001 with supervision. So it's just deepening that relationship to a level 4 system in what's supposed to be a Zeekr SUV.
And also the ongoing robotaxi rollout with Neo and Sixt, right? Move it in Israel and Germany. And Qualcomm is also, they've made quite a few announcements with Volvo, Honda, Renault, and also Jidu, right? Jidu is working with both Qualcomm and Nvidia. So these three, chip companies, they're the winners of all what's going on because of computing, because of all these hardware being put on.
Yeah.
You
And let me lean into that point, like, because in 2022 they can offer this promise of democratizing safety so that everybody deserves it. It shouldn't be a luxury item or a feature that is an optional feature, right? It should be standard, like seatbelts. So by 2023, 2024, these guys, the hardware providers and these chip manufacturers, they need to work very closely with these AV companies to put their money where their mouth is. Ultimately, are we going to have safer vehicles if we use your hardware software stack? So that's going to be the ultimate differentiator, right?
Here's where Luminar CEO Austin Russell, he made a bold statement saying that he wants to help OEMs to build an uncrashable car. Okay, just putting a stick on the ground.
I look at that as another way of saying what GM said, right? Zero crashes, zero. It's just another way of saying that, right?
And I'm really actually looking forward to that XC90 EV that's coming out later this year. But what Luminar is doing is a tad behind what the Chinese smart EVs startups have already done. Right, with the P5, all these upcoming models with the lidar, and adding extra sense of safety and autonomous driving capabilities. So yeah, and
currently smart EVs are pushing into like 30, 40 sensors for safety, and by 2025 I wouldn't be surprised if we pushed into the 70s and 80s. So there's a ton of redundancy and early warning systems, right? Because until we get into 25 years from now, when virtually every vehicle or mobility product is going to have some sort of autonomous features and ADAS or safety features, we're still going to be on the roads with people that are just driving, right? And so a lot of it's going to be just avoidance, and so a lot of that is going to have to do with redundancy and anticipation, whether or not, so as they get more affordable and smaller, I do see more of them being just packed on, right? Because currently it just implies safety. The number implies safety, but it doesn't actually translate to me clearly why it's safer, right?
Yeah, and the other caveat is when you see all of these announcements, they always come with something like where markets allow. That's the Mercedes way of putting it, of their 2030 goal of being a electric brand. With autonomous driving, for again, going back to the Luminar case, is their right pilot. They're still testing and waiting for approval in California, right? I think basically unsupervised autonomous driving, that's, level 3, basically, I think. So, and then now when you get into level...
Let's remind everybody that level 3 means that the OEM or the automaker or the provider takes over on the liability side. Whereas level 2, the driver is still responsible for safety.
And when you get into level 4, well, level 2, even with, let's say, Xpeng's City NGP or all scenario NGP, it's still level 2. We can say it's level 2 plus, but the human driver still needs to pay attention. And even that, remember, Xpeng said they're waiting on the rollout. It won't be as wide a rollout initially because you need kind of the local or regulatory framework
City
in
cooperation.
place to allow that. Now you hear these level 4 announcements by 2024, then you think, okay, either really the policy environment is going to really speed up over the next 2 years, or they're smoking, making these bold announcements.
Well, they know. I think there might be one or two lead cities that they know a little bit more about, and they're influencing a bit, right?
These
So
first tier, Beijing, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, are probably going to lead.
And not where I live, not in CBD, but down in
Yizhuang,
where it's a little more predictable. The traffic is a little more predictable. So.
And then I guess the other highlight from the CES is, over the years that I've been to it, I don't think EVs were that much of a topic, though, GM unveiled the Chevy Bolt in CES 2016. And some of the Chinese smart EV startups had their debuts at CES, Byton and Expo. Right. But I feel like this year, especially with GM's announcement of the Silverado, Chrysler's Airflow, maybe it's a bit more U.S. centric. That the U.S., the big two U.S. 1.5 actually, because Stellantis is like it seems like boom, here we are. And although the Chrysler's announcement is very interesting, they won't actually have a BEV until 2025. But then after that, it will be only 3 years before they move all electric. So I guess they have this long lead time, but once they're into it, they're into it, right? And then VinFast, right? They announced that they're stopping ICE production at the end of this year. They're turning into a all electric brand, and they put up 5 models. They're pulling a
5 models. 5 models.
They're definitely pulling an Evergrande. And they changed the model naming convention. Just 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Yeah. And you wonder what's brewing under the hood, so to speak, because the CEO left, and now, who knows what's going on, right? They have that partnership with ZF. The CEO was German. ZF is a German company now. Does that still stand, right? Like, there's still a ton of uncertainty, but they are not backing down from all these bold claims. VinFast is really still pressing on the accelerator, right?
And and I think the other highlight that stood out with me was Hyundai's meta mobility and mobility of things. We talk about Internet of Things, IoT. Yep. Now they come up with this MOT, which means they're trying to make everything move. And I saw the press conference where they were showing this like an office space where things you can kind of like quickly arrange things into different setups, things like that, and meta mobility.
Well, this is kind of the Neo Xiaomi thing where they're bleeding into a certain part of the lifestyle stuff, right?
And also, and not to mention the 3 Chinese LiDAR players, they all showed their star products respectively, and also they announced new ones at the CES. And they're LiDAR pretty much now is a $1,000 question instead of a $75,000 question.
Overall, I look at CES as a lot of optimism. I think part of the reason I think that everything for the last 14, 18 months has been China-centric is because, the Detroit Auto Show, a few of these conventions haven't been as splashy due to the pandemic. And so I think everybody's keying in on the CES 2022 because maybe announcements were either delayed or they wanted to build up the excitement and really just drop a hammer. Like GM, they'd done their own events, but when she's putting out Equinox
Blazer.
and all these other EVs by 23, it's like, and Chevy is effectively going to become EV only, by mid-decade, right? They might still sell ICEs, but they're not going to profile them. The Silverado's what they're trying to hang their hat on. So yeah, I think we're turning the corner, at least communication wise, in the United States. Now educating, creating awareness is going to be Ford's job. It's going to be GM's job, Stellantis, Chrysler's job to a lesser extent. The one thing that I think is notable about the U.S. market is that Hyundai took over for Honda for fourth place, I think, right? In United States
took
sales,
over
which is
GM for the first time.
So these two things are super, super, super significant, right?
But then you look at the EV space, Toyota is still a bit behind. I'm not talking about hybrids, but their EV, although they announced that big plan last month, but like in the US, that they seem to be a bit behind, at least from the US counterparts.
So here's my take a little bit, because we focused on the China market in past, but now we're talking more Europe and the United States a little bit more. I still think that the speed at which change is going to occur in the EU and the United States is going to be at a slower pace than China, because there's just not a ton or proliferation of EV brands that are coming out. It's going to be the legacies that really, really push the envelope when it comes to EV products adoption and sales. Whereas in China, it's these little guys that are pushing the big guys around, to your point, in several past episodes, where it's like the legacies are chasing the EV first companies, right? So
and we can move into the sales numbers a bit, I guess. I don't think there were, we talked so much of it. I don't think there were that many surprises. The December numbers are, for part of the reason is end of the year, the end of last year's subsidies. So there's always going to be a seasonal high in December. And everybody did well. And everybody that were supposed to do where they are, they were there, right? So there weren't any, big surprises. I don't think.
It should be noted. It should be noted that there is a factory that BYD has in Xi'an that was affected due to the lockdown there.
And
I actually think they probably would have gotten to 100,000 units.
It looks like that plan is returned to normal production according to the latest intel. But now there's 2 cases in Shenzhen. So, I mean, just listening to this and comparing what's going on in the U.S., it's just, I don't know what to say, right? We have millions of cases every day, and there's 2 cases in Shenzhen, and it's, I'm not, saying that who's right or wrong, but I'm just saying comparing the numbers is just. Hopefully it won't be too much of a problem, because Shenzhen is a big,
Well, there's just going to be a lot of scrutiny on China internally, domestically, because of the Olympics. So there's going to be a lot of probably extreme measures to make sure that everybody's safe for that.
So we got the Wuling and Baojun numbers. They only announced the total sales. So I don't have the specific
combined
Wuling mini EV. So their total GSEV, which is the global small electric vehicle platform models, was over 750,000. And then you have BYD, which had 600,000 units. So that's 1.3 million. And you add Tesla, well over, if you include the exports, 400,000 to 500,000. So that's 1.3, 1.7 million. And then the rest, right? The rest, quite a few who's done 100,000 or so.
we don't get to a foreign brand until number 11. And that's the ID series, right? At 70,000 or
well,
71,000 units.
The list I tweeted is by brand, but when you talk about by make or OEM, it might look a little bit different. But and if you put Volkswagen as a whole, right? They have other NEVs. So and again, the export, we talked about the export, right? Yeah, we got to talk about the export list. 388,000 NEVs exported in the first 11 months. That is also a mind-boggling number.
Yeah.
So that's, if I did my math correctly, out of the 3 million sold in the first 11 months, that's 15 or 16%, maybe.
Yeah.
So, the top countries, Belgium, right? I think 5 or 6 were European countries, and then the rest were Asia Pacific.
Thailand was 2.
Bangladesh,
I think, right?
That was interesting.
Yeah, that was interesting. But it makes me wonder how they define the NEV if it's going to Bangladesh, So
and also the Belgium being the top country with 100,000 units.
100,000.
Not all of them are actually consumed in Belgium. So that's the caveat. It's the initial port of entry. So that, of those 100,000 probably spread out over Europe.
And we should settle this once and for all. Norway was like number 10 with 1,000.
Yeah,
right?
So basically it's the
a rounding error.
Yeah, and it's only the NIO, I think NIO...
BYD.
Yeah, NIO, BYD, Xphone. NIO, I think someone tweeted that it was about 200 delivered in 2021 in Norway. So that's good.
20% market share, right?
But these numbers are always delayed, right? So we know that BYD, I think they will have, they delivered 1,500 units in Norway, I remember. Their target,
I think over 1,000.
So by the end of so the first 11 months, I guess BYD took up a huge portion of that number in Norway, right?
And a friend of mine who recently moved back to Sydney or to Australia, he's originally from Melbourne, he sent me an article about Australia. China has moved into the 4th position because currently Australia does not manufacture any vehicles that it sells. Virtually, I will say virtually, I won't say 100%, I'll say virtually every vehicle that is sold in Australia is imported. And where you would expect Japan to be number 1, there are 350,000 units imported from Japan. Thailand was number 2 at 230,000 units. China was number 4 at 76,000 units and gaining traction. They have 3 brands, MG, LDV, and Haval. So MG and LDV are both SAIC brands. Right? And Haval is the Great Wall brand. And this is a mix of ICEs and EVs, but we see that they're gaining traction not just in Europe, but all over the place around the world. And Europe, those import numbers from Europe are just going to increase in 2022, obviously, as more brands. We've already seen 8-9 brands say they're going to enter Europe for 2022. And I see also, I've been told anyways, there's a few more that are in conversations with importers in Australia as well. So we should see those numbers increase significantly. Notable in Australia, Germany, and the United States are down below at 45 and 35,000 units. So very, very small. The Japan and Thailand make a ton of sense because they're both right-hand drive, and Australia is a right-hand drive country. So China is either exporting kits and they're turning them into right-hand drive, or they're building right-hand drive and importing them or exporting them into Australia.
So speaking of Japan and the BYD E6, you saw that, right? That was interesting. I haven't looked into it too much, but slowly these Chinese brands are coming all over.
Yeah. I'd mentioned this to you in a WeChat yesterday. I think I was interviewed for a Bloomberg article from a Japanese journalist. She saw a spike in orders for small electric delivery vehicles. Think those, Lay, those really small vans, those
Wuling
Wuling
vans, yeah.
vans, right? So the they have the Japanese government has restricted the carbon emissions on these delivery vans, and the Japanese automakers have electric vehicle delivery vans, but they're priced at, I think, 2, 3, 4x of what the Chinese EV delivery vehicles are. And so there's concern in Japan that the Chinese EVs will kind of take over for, and we're talking thousands of these little delivery vans, right? So
Supply and demand, I
again,
guess.
Australia, Japan, Europe, right? And we'll see them in the United States before 2025. I guarantee
well,
it.
here's the thing. Back to a little bit on CES 22, GM and Ford, right? So forget the pickups, but they're moving fast on the vans part, and also Stellantis, right? They got an order. They're working with Amazon on their software development, and they have an order of their ProMaster, Ram ProMaster vans, electric vans. Walmart, right? FedEx. So
BrightDrop, GM BrightDrop got more orders.
Yeah, so that's a.
And then Rivian, their share price took a dump when those other announcements.
When I visited the Rivian hub on November 16th, they were at an all-time high, and it's been low ever since then.
Yeah, it was around $100,
150
2 or 3
billion
weeks ago.
Valuation, right? Was it something like that?
Yeah, so now it's at 78 billion.
Anyways, so you wanted to talk about the 2022 predictions, maybe sales.
Yeah, so
I haven't looked into my crystal ball. 5 million is my initial gut guess, like everyone else, but you showed me a list. Someone said it's going to be 5.8 million. What was
that is a monster number. I think operationally it's going to be very difficult. 5.8 is a monster number, and it's going to be close to the same growth rate as 2021, right?
When we said the earlier beginning of when we were doing this pod, our initial projection for 2021 was 2.5 million. We were wrong by 1 million units. So for 2022, I said in my presentation the other day that we're probably not going to see another year like 2021 in terms of the sheer volume growth. So from 1.37 in 2020 to 3.5, a 2.5x or over 2 million additions. So for this year, on top of 3.5, you add 2 million more. I think it might be a lot more difficult than 2021. So that's my take.
I think there's no question. I think there's going to be physical constraints with parts.
But yeah.
So I did write. So you reminded me, because in this week's newsletter, last week's pod, I said that I will roll out my predictions for 2022 on this pod. So let me go through those, and you can give me a thumbs up, nod your head, debate with me whether you agree or disagree. Because a lot of these are tongue in cheek, right? Because they're just, it's very difficult to go against.
There are educated guess. Let's put it that way.
So my first, again, and this is as just kind of a fun thing, right? A Chinese smart EV maker will offer 10 LiDAR on a vehicle in 2022. A foreign legacy OEM, and I'm thinking a European one, will invest in a China EV first company. Not necessarily a startup, but a China EV first. I'm thinking maybe a WM, a Leap motor, somebody that's already a little bit established. Maybe not like a G-Do or anything like that, but
There's a soundbite.
yeah, we will get to 5 million units of sales for 2022. I didn't say 5.8, I said 5
Let's just
million.
say 5+ million.
Yes. But it's going to take a lot of overtime from the materials, sourcing, and the logistics folks, and a bunch of help from Wuling, Tesla, and BYD. Those guys drive the volume, right? So the average price of a robotaxi will shrink to below 400,000 RMB, and it'll trigger many more pilots and other startups to enter the space. The Detroit Auto Show, this is the funny one, will take place in September for the first time in over 3 years.
God.
And I will be in attendance.
And I plan to be there.
Yeah. CATL will feel some growing pains. When you relied on so much, it puts increased pressure. And once you're relied on outside of your domestic market, things get lost in translation sometimes. We're talking 30% of the market. That's a lot of pressure on them. The Cadillac Lyriq and the Ford Mustang Mach-E will each sell over 40,000 units. BYD will sell over 1.4 million units next year.
Only?
And NEVs. Oh yeah. So that's the thing in my head. I'm like, man, is this too conservative? So I'm just throwing it out there. And
1.4 million.
Tesla will sell.
That's more than double. Is that what you're saying?
Is that double?
They did 600,000 last year.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that scratch that.
Okay.
Scratch that.
Don't scratch it.
I thought they were at. Okay. No. I wrote it down. I wrote it down for a reason. And Tesla's going to get to 1.4.
Okay.
Waymo enters the China market.
Oh.
And we're talking global numbers. So those are my predictions. Some bold, some not so bold. What do you think?
With the way it's going, what's the golden rule in China? Everything's possible. Nothing is impossible.
Yeah. But anything's possible, but it's never easy.
No. What's Tesla's number this year for China? Do you know roughly, including exports?
Well, total production is going to be over 400,000, right?
Oh, well over. I think they're going to be over their capacity.
Yeah,
450,000. I think.
But remember, when I say 1.4, Berlin's coming online, Austin's coming online. So and so they're going to have enough capacity to fulfill that 1.4, I believe. And I think Europe is going to really the take rate in Europe once Berlin gets going, and they're able to manipulate pricing a little bit more, a little bit easier, a little bit better due to building domestically. I think we'll see strong sales coming out of Giga Berlin. I'm actually more interested in seeing when. It's not if. And you tell me if I'm right or wrong, or you agree or disagree, when the MIC Model 3 sales start to tail off, what they'll do. Because the ET5 doesn't come till Q3, right? So that's not a huge concern for most of the year. The P5
is already ramping.
Is gonna
5,000, more than 5,000 in December already.
Right.
So,
and I'm looking at the P5 as a viable competitor to the standard range Model 3. Okay. And so I see strong sales of the Model Y continuing into 2022.
I think here's a way that we can talk about 2022 is it's sort of the last horror of the subsidy era, right? So this is the last year. This is the last year that subsidies will still be available. So that will be a kind of a force that will push up the volume a bit. So And then there's still, right, 2022, there's still going to be new brands coming out. I'll add
Oh
one.
man.
How many? I don't know. But the latest is that Tuanchua, right? It's a NASDAQ listed
Yes.
automotive transaction platform.
Mm-hmm.
If they can go make cars, China EVs and more can go make cars.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
We're going to make an announcement.
We have a listener who runs a hedge fund, right? We have a listener who runs a hedge fund. Maybe he can get us cheap money.
And also 2022 is the first year, we talked about this in detail last episode, the opening of the foreign investment rules,
yes.
which is part of the reason why you said that these foreign companies are making additional moves, whether making some investment into the China EV Inc. or doing away with shares in some of the existing JVs. Stellantis, again, being one that will make some kind of announcement, probably before the March 1st strategy plan announcement with their joint venture. Other than that, I think you were pretty bold.
And think of it this way: the reason I mentioned that investment is because if I am one of these middle tier mass market EV first companies that have been around a little bit, that raise capital 200, 300, 400 million, it gets me to the next product. But if I allow a legacy to come in and invest $300, $400 million, maybe I can sell my vehicle side by side in their originally already established retail and dealer network, right? And that increases my reach instantaneously. So I have no doubt that there are conversations being had over coffee, initial meetings, initial chats about how things could work at a principal level, and then we'll see what happens. Because to your point, there's still new brands entering, but you and I know there's going to be dozens of brands that are closing their doors too come 2022. So in summer of 2022.
So
right?
With regard to Mach-E and Cadillac Lyriq, so it seems like you are pretty bullish on these two models.
Well, I think it's a combination of being bullish, but also having a 5 to 5.5 million unit market to sell into, right?
I think what I will add is for GM in China, Buick, with maybe exception of the GL8, and Chevrolet, their brand dilution has been significant, these two brands in the Chinese market over the last few years. While Cadillac, I guess thanks to its sort of premium positioning and the second tier, behind Audi, Mercedes, BMW, has been relatively well. So putting that first model on the Cadillac brand, I think is smart. So it should do well. Mach-E should do well. But again, if you look at the foreign brands overall, it's still going to be a steep climb to catch up with the Chinese companies, not only the startups, but the traditional, the BYDs, the Great Walls.
Let's just be frank, Lei. You were in the middle of it for 20 years. The foreign automakers, before EVs came to market, they weren't super strong on the marketing and customer engagement side. They just sold, and I'm oversimplifying this, but they effectively sold a lot of cars because of their branding, right? And the quality and reliability, yes, that's kind of a qualifier. If the quality and reliability wasn't there, they wouldn't sell. So it was there, but also Volkswagen sold because of the Volkswagen badge. Buick sold because of the Buick badge. And, this is one of those head scratchers because Buick is an old person's brand, although over the last recent years in the United States, they've tried to also become a younger brand too. But here in China, younger folks are it's not unusual to see younger folks in driving a Buick, right? So now with the EV first kind of taking the pole positions, they're going to have to really learn how to increase customer engagement significantly in order to, because there's a lot of noise on the internet in advertising and stuff like that. So it's just in the traditional promotions, sponsorships, those events that these big foreign brands normally do. I don't know how effective they are, right? You know, because right now we're talking digital media, we're talking digital marketing where everything is customized to that person's mobile phone and their habits. So that's going to be a challenge for them in the China market.
You know, for GM, thankfully they have Wuling, so that's a good part. So
Yeah, they can rely on Wuling to learn from, right? You know, like that should be a Harvard business case. It's an amazing story.
That was a very early strategic move.
That brings us to the end of this week's show. Lei and I thank you for tuning in. My name is Tu Lee, and you can find me on Twitter at Sino Auto Insight. That's SinoAutoInsight. You can find Lei on Twitter at LeiXing77. That's LEIXING77. If you wouldn't mind rating and or reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you grab your podcast from, we'd appreciate that as well. Even better, if you enjoy this show, please tell your friends about it. Please join us again next week as we track down all the latest news on China, EVs, and more.